storyline of Group A is going to be which team is going to step up and actually fulfill the potential that the fans have in them.
I'm playing at Misfits. They have one of the recipes for a good team, which is the mixture of talent versus veteran players, which is something that usually works for teams.
I can pitch for myself. I believe that I can be a top 3 top player in Europe.
I feel like the roster we currently have is probably the best one so far.
As for now, I believe that we have potential, but it's not the H2K that could win the split just yet.
They're gonna make him disappear! How about that for a magic trick? What an ace!
I'm in there. Combo!
Oh, the face! Leading the charge. The Nexus is destroyed, and Misfits dominate Game 2.
Welcome to the European LCS. We're coming to you live from freezing cold but beautiful Berlin, Germany. As tonight, 4 teams head back to the Rift as they tussle for points early in the spring split. We had some cosplayers in the house as well as H2K. Hebben we een Rwamne sitting up, Vizichachi and Hilesang in a fantastic mood, as well as Prawley to lead his squad into the match versus Unicorns of Love. Hello everyone, I'm Eve Bishop, supporter. Joining me tonight are Andrew, Verius, Day and Jonas Trashy Anderson, the jungler for Splice. Thank you for joining us and congrats on your first series win.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it was great to finally get a win after the first week, which was kind of rough, but good start. I mean, good start for this week.
Good start for this week. Also, we debated having the fish show on the desk, but after your reaction yesterday on Twitter, we thought it might be better just to get Verius.
I think I'll keep my hands up here.
All right, that's fantastic. Okay, well then continue with the news of the day. Let's take a look at the standings. Splice, as said, they got their very first points or their very first series wins. Now in 3rd place in Group B. Veri, is everything going as you expected it to be, or is something popping out?
I feel that so far everything is fairly standard, other than Splice maybe sitting in the middle of the table. Perhaps a bit of a speculation as to whether they'd be at the top, but you can't take anything away from H2K.
I mean, I completely agree. I think the top 3 teams of the groups right now are the teams that I expected to be in the top, so nothing special in the standing.
All right, and as you mentioned, yesterday was a bit of...
Yeah, yesterday, I mean, we had a full day of... We had the losers day. Everyone that lost in week 1 ended up... some teams were able to claim a couple wins, so they moved now into the winners group, which is what we have today, which is what I'm really excited to see.
All right, we'll see what happens. And looking back on yesterday a bit more, Trashy, I said your first win versus Vitality. Consensus among the analysts was that you guys wanted in picks and bans already. What else can you tell us about the series?
I mean, obviously, I think we had really solid drafts compared to them, and even in the games, I felt like we were doing mistakes, but Vitality was playing very passive, and I don't think they really pushed us to do anything special in the game. So, to be completely honest, I think it was more the fact that they were playing poorly than us playing super well. So, we still have a lot to show that I think we're doing in practice that we are not really completely fulfilling on stage.
So if you'd have to give yourself marks out of 10 or like a judgment for the match you played versus H2K versus the one you played versus Vitality for your performance specifically, would it be a lot different?
I think for the series against H2K, it will probably be like 1 or 2 out of 10, and for the series here, maybe a 5. I think I know I can do a lot better, so.
All right.
That's my point.
We'll see how that evolves. And the other series yesterday, Fnatic versus Giants, Verius. Giants losing another series, but showing signs of good things.
Yeah, I mean, in game 1, they looked very promising, took a lot of people by surprise, picking up their first win on the board, or a first game win once again. And honestly, I feel that Giants are definitely not a team that you can afford to underestimate, just based on how they perform. But Fnatic, they seem to regain their composure moving into games 2 and 3, and just felt like another day in the office, especially that game 3 stomp that they had against Giants.
I mean, one team had Maokai one time, and the other team had Maokai twice. So I think that's an easy word, right? So,
yeah.
But to be honest, I think Fnatic were just playing a bit disrespectful the first game, and then they realized that they have to actually take the game serious, and then they could close out the game.
And they pulled it back.
Yeah.
We'll be bringing you 2 best of 3s. Today we're gonna start things off with our match of the week, the Unicorns of Love versus H2K. And let's quickly touch on Misfits versus G2 Esports. Is it too early for Misfits to beat G2 videos?
I feel like that there is a lot of potential for Misfits to win out on the early game. I feel like that's a promising aspect for them to take advantage of based on what we've seen from them so far. The question is whether or not they'll be able to maintain that lead throughout the later stages of the game, because having a chat with Trashy earlier, something that he identified the difference was that G2 really are willing to take risks, whereas Misfits are not quite.
Yeah, I think Misfits have the fundamentals down. They know how to play the map. They know what side they pressure in the early game, but they're kind of lagging, like sometimes the go button to actually finish out the games. And I think that's a point you can't really. You kind of need to do that against G2, because G2 will just take advantage of this and actually play the game as they should and close out the game. So on paper, there are 2 top teams, understanding, but I think in reality, I think G2 are just the superior team.
All right, we'll see about that a bit later. For now, we're going to take a closer look at our first match of the day. A team that also knows where the go button is, the Unicorns of Love. Have been impressive so far. They did play Origin on the first weekday here, or the first play day on Friday. They beat them as well. They had some decisive team fights, but a slower start. In general, how good is this team so far, Trashy?
Honestly, even though they have 2-0 standing, I haven't really been, honestly, I'm not quite sure about how they're playing. I think the early game are really weak. They're playing a lot of scaling champions. Their drafting is quite interesting. I think they're planning to just go late game, and I think that won't work against H2K, because they will just punish your early game and then you will lose.
And I mean, when you talk about early game, you kind of have to look at the jungler from H2K, because Xerxes has been bringing out things like the Ivan. He brought out the Zac yesterday. And while these are really interesting and unique, as Trashy was talking about, there is a reason why the meta is what it is. And when you allow Jankos to be on something as aggressive as like a Lee Sin or maybe even a Kha'Zix, I expect him to punish Xerxes for picking more of these scaling junglers.
Yeah, you just mentioned the featured matchup that we're going to look at, which is Jankos versus Xerxes. Jankos, of course, he is the early game king, and it isn't just first blood, it's just the entire pressure he puts on the map during that early game. Is that going to be kind of what is going to bring UOL down in this series?
I mean, I had the pleasure to play against him last week, and after that series, I kind of understand why I think Jankos is considered. I think, honestly, he's the best jungler we have here in Europe, because he knows exactly how to punish the laners in the early game, and he knows exactly his limits of his champions. And I know that he just puts so much fear into the enemy team, because he can be anywhere on the map, and he's so good at using this. So I think the matchup is heavily in favor of him.
I mean, if nothing else, this will be a great test for Xerxes, because so far, I feel he's only gone against not as good junglers. So if you really want to test yourself, go up against one of the best in Europe.
All right, let's see what happens. Predictions, guys. Unicorns of Love or H2K, and how?
So I feel that based on what we've seen so far, I'm optimistic for the Unicorns. They should take game 1, but I think H2K will close it out 2-1.
I think this series will be a very fast series with H2K closing it 2-0.
Okay, we'll see what happens. Enough from us. We are almost ready to bring you the picks and bans for game 1 between H2K and